Maurice, that's you? Excellent. So our next presenter, some of you may know, is Maurice Cox, who is a recent transplant to New Orleans. He is perhaps best known as an architect of national and international renown, particularly in the areas of community design and public interest design. Here in New Orleans, he's come to take over the Tulane City Center at the Tulane School of Architecture, which is their community outreach arm. And so they are doing a lot of public interest work for nonprofit groups and others here in the city, helping them with design and architectural needs. Prior to coming to New Orleans, he was director of design for the National Endowment for the Arts, where he oversaw an enormous expansion of their grants programs. And also, in his previous life, was an elected official in your hometown, I believe, was Charlottesville, Virginia, where he was a member of the city council and mayor. And so I think he brings a variety of perspectives to tonight's topic, which is why we've asked him to be here. So everyone, please welcome Maurice Cox.
So thank you for the introduction, and thanks for the invitation to try to give a perspective from someone who comes from a very different place, where the kind of pedestrian congestion, the kind of music congestion that you have in New Orleans, cities would kill for. They would die for this. And when I came to Charlottesville, Virginia in 1993, I came from another place that was accustomed to seeing pedestrian congestion and the friction of these kinds of uses being very closely located, a good thing. And that was Florence, Italy. So I came from a place where the kinds of crowds that you generate every Mardi Gras happen every day. And that's what people consider the quality of an urban life. So I came from that to a little city in Virginia, Charlottesville, Virginia. Very, very high quality of life and very proud of their cultural production. But their center was as dead as a doornail. Okay? So I'm coming from a place, just to be warned, where congestion is good, where the kind of friction that drives you all crazy is something that people value. The question is, how do you have those two things coexist in a way that support each other? So Charlottesville, Virginia, I'm going to just talk about one case in the core of our downtown. This is what it looked like in 1975. That's the central Main Street. This is after urban renewal, where the vast majority of the African American cultural district had been demolished to make way for the new city, and tore, in effect, the heart of this small town, tore it out. It took about 25, 30 years to get it back, to a point where there was the kind of urban congestion and vitality that most cities would dream of having. It was done around a pedestrian mall. This was very much the rave back in the 70s, where they evicted all the cars and they paved, bricked over Main Street and made it a kind of pedestrian area exclusively. But that did not necessarily guarantee that the pedestrians would come. That took about 20 years. So I arrived 20 years after they put this in, and I'm in 1993, and it's still as dead as a doornail. Okay? So the question was, then, how did it start to look like this? What was consciously done through regulations and ordinance to bring about the kind of cultural production and congestion that you see? So this is a typical day. This is during the day. And during the evening, the numbers increase more. So when you start to get this amount of people together, and this amount of outdoor dining, and this amount of cultural opportunities, you inevitably are creating an area of friction. Part of how that friction was built was through a very conscious effort to get people to live in the downtown. So the regulations were purposefully constructed to increase the urban density so you can have more people living downtown, to create more friction between cultural production and kind of domestic life. So I worked really, really hard to get thousands of units built in the very same place that people perceive to be the place where culture and entertainment was located. So from my sense, if you have one and you don't have the other, there's an imbalance. But the residents, in many ways, keep the cultural production in check. And that balance, if it's skewed one way or the other, is a far less successful recipe. So that's my little piece about housing and the necessity of having people live in close quarters to the place where you're trying to create a greater kind of cultural district. So we went about on the city council of trying to get more pedestrians in the core of the downtown during the day. And the answer to that was a family-oriented kinds of entertainment. So we consciously sought development for a skating rink, for a multiplex theater where you could have kids and adults going to different cinemas, generally things that would attract families with children. And then began to build a series of new institutions. This is an arts center, and it's an arts center, a community theater, and a film studio for teenagers located on that pedestrian mall. So the city commissioned this work, again, trying to give some kind of permanent institutional face to the kind of theatrical cultural production within the city. And then a fairly aggressive plan to adaptively reuse a series of theaters that had fallen into vacancy or disrepair. So within a 2 or 3 block area, a number of theaters had been converted to cultural uses. And others for music venues. So in this old kind of second run movie theater, all of the seats were yanked out and it became a concert venue. So all of these are block next to block next to block. So far, they're all indoors. They can be fairly contained. Then you get to the far east end of this pedestrian space, and this is what you found. And this was the grand problem. A series of streets intersecting around a traffic island, and you can see this band shell that was just enough to cover a stage. On Fridays after 5, thousands of people would come to hear concerts here. That's right. That's right. Now, the challenge of this was it's outdoors. It creates an enormous amount of noise. There's no place created once they, as you say, the people go away. And it also was prone to being rained out during the concert series. So we took on the task of how do you bring 3,500 people to a spot in an urbanized area that where you don't have to worry about concerts being rained out, and you could control the noise acoustically by its covering, and not build a scrap of parking in the process. And this outdoor concert venue was this design was the solution that we came up with, covering the entire 3,500 seats with one gigantic sail to pedestrianize the entire area around that so that people could come by foot and by transit, and to create a venue that arguably could function 7 days a week. Just an aside, part of the anchor of that pedestrian area was a monument to free speech, which was an 80-foot long blackboard with chalk at its base and situated right in front of City Hall. And so we've watched this message board really become a mainstay in one's kind of experience of living and walking in Charlottesville. But the main thing was this notion of trying to control the noise, trying to control the potential for protecting this from the weather by covering it over with a sail. This idea was not my idea. It wasn't anyone in city government's idea. It was a citizen in a community meeting who simply said, have you ever thought to just cover the whole damn thing? And we wouldn't have to worry about the rain anymore. So you be mindful of what might come out of a community meeting. So this is what how it works today. It's a gigantic sail. It now, instead of concerts Fridays after 5, which are all free and continue to be free, there are concerts 4 nights a week. And thousands of people come to the downtown. And that building you see in the foreground is the transit center. So people take the bus and they take the trolley to come to the concert from parking that's located in further out. But one of the challenges is that this outdoor concert hall is right at the edge of a residential neighborhood. And part of the challenge is getting that acoustics right to the point where you can control the sound. And so I'm a believer that technically you can come up with the solutions. And there were many, many studies and requirements made before we decided to put this amphitheater there, and much calibration that had to happen in monitoring the sound to get it to a point where it became a non-issue for that adjacent community. Some of you may know the Reverb Jazz Band. The other spontaneous part of this was the proliferation of street musicians. Where pedestrians go, so do street musicians. And it's a good thing. The question is, in one end, you've got, young high school students who are learning their craft on the streets. And then other times, people say, well, one person's noise is another person's music. Well, what if a drummer comes right next to your cafe and starts to play? So the challenge of how do you negotiate the tensions between these is a real thing. And so ordinances were enacted that would restrict the distance that musicians, single musicians, could how closely they could play next to an outdoor cafe. So I think that the kind of cultural production, the kind of pedestrian congestion, the kind of vitality that you have, you should be very careful about over-regulating it and allowing it to coexist in a type of tension that requires you to come back time and time again and have that discussion. And that's a discussion that I hope we'll have tonight in our panel. Thank you.
Well, okay, well, I have learned a couple of things. We're going to put a sail over Jazz Fest. That's number one. And don't tell Quint I said that. I am not sure how to make this full screen. That one. Yes, thank you. The technologically minded audience. That's still not what I'm looking for, but it's going to have to work. Let's see, the other thing I learned is I would love to see a big old chalkboard in front of City Hall. That would be really great. And who knows, maybe, Maurice, you'll think about running for mayor. Or at least maybe we'll have an architect, urban planner, urban designer for a mayor. How about that? No pressure, no pressure.